update you more now on the main political news of the day here at home. The ANC's nomination process and the nominations results of branch general meetings for the top 6 national officials of the governing party. Our senior political reporter Ziyanda Ngcobo joins us now with the latest on this. Ziyanda, good afternoon to you. There's a lot to talk about here. Obviously, going through the numbers, the first is what appears to be quite strong support for President Cyril Ramaphosa, more than twice as many votes as Dr. Zweli Mkhize. That's a big gap for Mkhize to cover.
Absolutely, and I think, the real work for those who are jostling for positions begins today. So President Ramaphosa has those high numbers, but so does Paul Mashatile. He's got 1,791, and compared to those who are vying for the position, I think he has even 3 times more, the numbers there. A similar case as well with Dumiseni Ntuli. He's got almost double the numbers. I think the tight race here will be between the treasurer, for the position of Treasurer General, many saying that Bejane Chauke is one of the underdogs who have really come out of nowhere, really, for this particular race. I think the emphasis and what we've seen, even with the provincial conferences that have taken place in the run-up to this moment, is the fact that many of the branches have been utilizing that process of nominating from the floor. I mean, I've reflected on the Musa Dladla region where the top 5 there, 3 of the 5 leaders were nominated from the floor. So, it would seem that the branches at some stage do reject sort of the top-down approach, which you and I have been talking about for quite some time now, that it would seem that this has largely been conducted in a different way, where many are running on an individual ticket as opposed to as a bloc, and are rejecting, this issue of waiting for the branches to nominate them.
It's a fascinating process, because one of the things, if you look at, we all know how important the position of Secretary General is, and in a way I think it's obvious for all to see what's happened as a result of the ANC having suspended its Secretary General and not having a person in that office. But Dumiseni Ntuli, 1,225 nominations. The next closest is Phumelo Mosule, 889. Now, Mosule has been doing interview after interview in recent weeks, explaining why he believes Ramaphosa must go. If he were to beat Ntuli, that's going to lead to a fascinating, what's the phrase, a relationship, tea time, tension in the top 6 of the ANC.
It would, Stephen, but I think, when you look at the numbers for the various positions, you would notice that the various slates have been rejected. So, for instance, Fikile Mbalula, who's on the Renew 22 slate, he's only at 749, and he's meant to be on the ticket of the president, who's gotten double the numbers of Dr. Zweli Mkhize. So there's a bit of a disjuncture there insofar as what the branches are actually communicating at this point in time. What I found interesting is, it's also a conversation you've been having throughout the afternoon, is the fact that there are only 2 women who've been nominated, and that's for the same position of Deputy Secretary General. And now there's already talk that, if, for an example, Nomvula Mokonyane wins, with the suggestion and the proposal for constitutional amendment to have a second DSG, then you could also still have a Phoebe Potgieter-Qubule also becoming the second DSG, which would mean that, in essence, Ramaphosa would pretty much get, if these numbers are anything to go by, he'd pretty much get the people that he seems to be amenable to working with us. I've been told that, in fact, his people have reached out to the likes of Dumiseni Ntuli, and that's why I was saying the real work begins now, because after these numbers, I think, the language, the tone, and the kind of negotiations that the leaders engage with is going to be different.
I find this difficult to believe that this could happen, but Gwede Mantashe, after 15 years in the top 6 of the ANC, from 2007 onwards, could be out. He won 979 nominations for the position of national chair, but Stanley Matabata won 1,492. I don't know if I'm old enough to remember a top 6 without Mantashe.
I don't know either. But, Stephen, I think what has been clear here is that the ANC in Limpopo, their strategy is clearly working for them. From the time the ANC in Limpopo went to conference in June, they all agreed that they would elect Stanley Matabata to become the chair, but then he would be the candidate that Limpopo puts forward to become national chair. So when that process of the various bilaterals between the provincial leadership took place, whether it was with KwaZulu-Natal, whether it was with Limpopo and Mpumalanga, etc., etc., Limpopo has always been very clear, regardless of the factions within the province, that Stanley Mathabatha must become chair. So clearly that has yielded some results in terms of that bartering process that's taken place. Some have said that it's because, the RET faction in Limpopo would want to actually take full control of the province, and having someone like Stan gone would also mean that they could really take hold, and the proxies of Daniel Caesar would be able to take full control of the leadership of the organization in that province. So that's one way of explaining why then the numbers for Stan Mathabatha are so high.
There are also other people who appear to be losing out that I do think we need to reflect on. Dr. Nkosazana Dlamini-Zuma, the COGTA minister, clearly not in the running. Lindiwe Sisulu, not in the running either. Both of them have been making interesting public comments over the last few weeks.
Very interesting comments coming from them, and I think for the most part they've been along the lines of gender, but more important for Lindiwe Sisulu, she's been emphasizing how much she just doesn't believe in this leadership, so much so that many have even said, then why doesn't she just resign if she really believes both in the government and within the ANC that this leadership led by President Cyril Ramaphosa is so poor. Equally with Dr. Nkosazana Dlamini-Zuma has reflected on, the gender parity and equity issue within the organization. It's over, a century old, and they're still not getting it right. Every time a woman is nominated, it's only within the secretariat. So that is also quite telling. But it's also telling, I think with Dr. Nkosazana Dlamini-Zuma, who we had an interview with recently, was also saying that she understands that she hasn't been pronounced by the provinces that have been pronouncing. She was asking, is it because of her gender? Is it because she doesn't have the resources, maybe? I don't know. But certainly, when it comes to that issue, it's quite clear that the branches, in particular in KwaZulu-Natal, which she had the full backing of going into Nasrec in 2017, that the picture is completely different. Even former President Jacob Zuma, who said he wouldn't mind becoming national chair, has not featured anywhere. What has been even more critical for me, Stephen, is how the incumbent, the only, leader of the top six now, in the form of Deputy President David Mabuza, he's also been snubbed by the branches.
The Mabuza story is fascinating, and there's so much to it. I think on the one side, there's the question of what have you done with the position of deputy leader? Yeah. You could say the same for Kgalema Motlanthe when he was there. You could also, to be fair, have said the same of Ramaphosa. 5 years as deputy president, only twice did he really speak up. One was to show his support for then Finance Minister Pravin Gordhan, and the second was during the cabinet reshuffle, the 1st of April reshuffle in 2017. Otherwise, he did virtually nothing. Mabuza could be accused of doing virtually nothing, and yet, we could go back even further, Zuma could be accused of the same thing while deputy president. The fact is that he's surely on the way out. And 5 years ago, people were talking about him all the time.
They were talking about him all the time, so much so that there was even talk about what would a presidency under David Mabuza look like, assuming that once Ramaphosa leaves, he would be the natural person to take over as president of the country. I think there's also been a lot of talk about the deputy president's health also as well. But yes, there has been a sense that he hasn't done much in his position. But also what's fascinating about Mabuza is that he isn't also somebody who plays his cards outright. And I still say it's early-ish in the process, because this is not the end of it, right? So we know that there's still going to be a lot of jostling. There's still going to be the names of the 200 people who would serve on the 80-member NEC. And we know that we didn't expect him to become deputy president in 2017, because he was just going to deliver Mpumalanga to the NDZ slate, and then he did the complete opposite. So I also wouldn't necessarily rule out the cat, as they call him.
Ziyanda Ngcobo, so much more to talk about in that bag. Thank you very much indeed.